Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I just got back from vacation. Now I'm ready to kind of go and kind of move on to getting you guys ready for residency. Number one thing we're going to talk about in this episode is answering a question that I hear over and over again, which is, what are my chances? And it's a really important question to answer because you are going to be making some of your choices as far as like, when am I going to apply for a job if I don't get a residency, or when am I going to start applying for residency? Should I apply for residency? Oh, I really like this APPE stuff, especially critical care. Maybe I do want to do a residency. And all of these things are starting to happen right now as you're pulling from summer, getting more into your practice. Where for me, it was the exact opposite. I knew that I wanted a retail and community experience, and I had a wonderful one and a great career. So let's start off with just some resources in becoming a student of the process. I am someone who I just returned another book. I tried to read a book. Even though I went on vacation, I tried to read a physical book and I couldn't do it because it's just not an audiobook. And I absolutely consume audiobooks, but just couldn't do the book even with all the time I had on vacation. So the Pharmacist Residency and Career Series, it's 7 books that have audiobooks, starting with the Strong Residency Letter of Intent, Residency Interview Help once you get the interview, 100 Strong Residency Interview Questions, Answers, and Rationales, Phone Interview Survival Tips, which is the same as the virtual kind of, many of the principles are the same for virtual, Phase 2 if you need it, Finding Your Unicorn Job, and then Read This Before Pharmacy Residency is for those of you who are really at the point of maybe P2, P3 year, trying to figure out what you want to do, want to make sure your grades are high enough. But that's what I would do. Start becoming a student of the process on your way in and out. Just start listening to those books. You can buy them in ebook and print book form, but I just recommend starting to kind of get that mentality going with the audio. So the first thing is, when you're assessing what are my chances of getting a residency, the first thing you actually want to look at is the ASHP match stats from the prior year. That's at natmatch.com/ASHPRMP/STATS.html. And at the bottom, you're going to see PGY1 applicants combined phase 1 and 2 by school. And this is the place that you want to look when you're first starting your journey. And I'll show you the huge differences here. Well, I don't want to show you the schools that are struggling, but let me show you a school that is absolutely not struggling. And you guys kind of know this, that North Carolina really has tremendous success in this regard. So of the 102 that went into the match, 92 earned interviews. And of those 92, 86 earned a residency placement and 6 didn't. So if you kind of bump that up to 100, that means that about 92% of anyone that went to UNC or 86% of anyone that went to UNC and initially tried to get a residency got one. And then of those, some of them might have gone on to retail, realized, this is not for me and all of that. But really, you're looking somewhere between, high 80s, 90%. And then you want to look at your school and go, okay, well, where do I have to be in my residency application class relative to that? So again, that's the first place that you look, because your approach is going to be extremely different if you're coming from a school where you only have to beat 6 people out of 92 versus a school where you might have to be one of the top 6 people out of 92. And the rates are huge divide. But what I'm going to do is, regardless of what your school rate is, I'm going to show you something that I think is really under explained, I guess, to those that are trying to go for a residency, and that is how regional many PGY1s are. Now, this is not true for PGY2. I'm talking to those who are looking for a PGY1. PGY2, you will see that it is a nationwide process, that when you look at the PGY2 residents, that they come from all over. But I'm going to show you how even within a single program, there is a divide, and that it may be more regional or it may not. Now, most of the programs have not updated to the new residents yet, but you can still get just as much value kind of looking at this and seeing where these residents are coming from. So I just picked 4 for a reason. We're going to look at UNC, Hopkins, Chicago, and then Princeton Baptist, which is down in the deep south, back where near where I went to school for undergrad or pre-pharmacy in Gainesville. So what I want to do is show you that, okay, this is my number from my school. This is how successful my school is. Now, let me bump my odds by making sure to take into account the regionality, if you want to call it that, of these programs. And again, we're talking about top programs, and when you're talking about the most competitive programs, they can kind of choose who they want, but you'll see how very, very specific it is as to whom they're looking for and where those people are from. Okay. All right. So before I start, though, just a reminder, if you want to go to residency.teachable.com, you want my one-on-one help with the interview prep and support. I will give you 6 months of email support as you're going through the interviews, or for $300 if you really want to, $295. I'll do a mock half-hour interview with you. Extreme LOI Makeover, again, this is kind of the thing that I'm known for. You send me your letter of intent, we go through it, make a great one for your top choice, and then we build a template that is unique to you. That's going to go out to the other ones, and then checkbox CV and resume planner if you want help with your CV. But really, the letter of intent is where people like to find me out. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to separate UNC, which is a phenomenal program. Many applications going here in the hundreds. I've heard, through the grapevine is like 400 or 500. I have no idea if that's true or not. I have no idea. But what you want to do is you want to go through the residency, those that are there, and you say, okay, this person's from Kentucky, University of Kentucky. This person's from UNC. This person is from PCP, Philadelphia College of Pharmacy. This person is from Kentucky again. Okay, and you're starting to get an idea. Maybe I just clicked on her twice. This one is from Kentucky. And then I could have sworn we didn't have that here. But yeah, St. Louis College of Pharmacy, that was the one I skipped over. Okay. And then we see University of Illinois Chicago, and University of Wisconsin Madison, and we see University of Florida. So we see very few programs that are anywhere near, even below the 50% mark. These schools that these students have gone to, you're really not going any farther west than the Mississippi. And it sounds like you've got Midwest, you've got South, and Deep South. And I'm from Maryland, which is south of the Mason-Dixon line. So technically we're a southern state. But when you talk to people about the South really starts at Richmond. And you go from Richmond, kind of down to the Panhandle in Florida. And so Gainesville or Ocala would probably be where I would stop the South from going, kind of Richmond to that Ocala down 95. And so you see, okay, well, we've got a couple of people from there, but you notice that there's one or two from the school that is actually there. UNC. You see there's a couple from Kentucky, which is a phenomenal school nationally and very close in proximity regionally. You see someone else is from Florida. You see someone is from St. Louis, which is about the western edge. You see someone's from Illinois. But you see that really you didn't see anyone from the Northeast. Okay, so I didn't see anyone from Maryland, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, Maine, and I don't know if this is just because of the applications or it's just those are the people that were getting appies there, and those were the people that were going to school and interacting with the residency. But as you're kind of looking at these residencies, you absolutely have to look at where the current residents are from. And that is the one thing that I think that most people forget to look at. What they do instead is they kind of get this idea of, well, is it a really top residency or this and that? But really, do these people have a relationship? And because they're in geographic proximity, it's more likely that they probably do. I mean, North Carolina isn't that terribly far from Gainesville. I remember going down to an engineering camp at NC State and then going to the University of Florida. So I know the difference is just a couple of hours. Okay, but let's look at that was the acute care track. So that was somewhat heterogeneous, where you've got, regional and then kind of expanded to the Midwest, expanded to the bottom of the Deep South, really no further north than North Carolina and Kentucky. But let's kind of look at the other one. So then we have an ambulatory care track, which I would argue is probably one of the toughest programs to get into in the country. In terms of difficulty. So we've got somebody from UNC, okay, so it's a UNC one, someone from Pitt, and then another person from Kentucky, and then another person from, I want to say it's Kentucky as well, yeah, Kentucky. Okay, so because there's 4, it's easy to just remember, okay, one was from UNC, 2 were from Kentucky, and then another one from Pitt. So as you're looking at ambulatory and acute care, you notice, wow, that's, when you actually kind of skew the data, they're like, okay, well, that's a lot of people from Kentucky. That's interesting that they took more people from the University of Kentucky than they took from their own program. Even though UNC has one of the highest match rates in the country, they've made the decision, those UNC students have made the decision not to go to UNC. And I think that's one of those things where you don't usually become a faculty member at the place that you're graduating from. So if you do want to become a faculty member at UNC, you would probably do your residency somewhere else and then come back at a later time. So when you're looking and you see those schools, then you realize, whoa, let's look at where those schools ranked. Now, this ASHP match stats are alphabetical, but I can take this, copy it, put it in a Word document, then put it in an Excel file, and then sort by the percentages. And when you do that, these residents or these residents of the ambulatory care track in here are from the highest matching schools in the country. Pitt, Kentucky, and UNC, I believe, are all in the top 10. Not 10%, top 10. So one of the most difficult residencies to get, no matter what. Then you notice that regionally, Pennsylvania is not terribly far from North Carolina. Kentucky isn't either, and obviously the North Carolina student was in state. So you see that it is very regionally focused. Okay, so even though it is a nationally renowned program, most of the students there are actually probably from there. And I think the reason for this is when you have hundreds and hundreds of applications, what do? Well, the first thing you're probably going to do is go to those people that you have a relationship with. And I would bet that most of these students have had an APPE or something like that at North Carolina, even if they didn't go to school there. Okay. Let's look at Hopkins, because Hopkins is a little bit special in terms of its APPE thing. So let's do the APPE thing so you can see it first. But APPE rotations at the Johns Hopkins Hospital are available solely to students from Duquesne, Jefferson, and then PCP. Those are all in Pennsylvania. Shenandoah. Those are the 4 Pennsylvania. Notre Dame of Maryland, University of Maryland, Baltimore, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, the 3 Maryland schools. And then I'm not sure how these guys got in there, but then you've got Ohio Northern and Palm Beach Atlantic. But those are the only ones that can do APPEs there. So what we're going to expect without looking is say, okay, well, if only those students can do APPEs there, then I bet that there's going to be a couple of those schools represented. And so we go to the PGY1 Pharmacy Resident Biographies, and this one's a little bit easier. I feel like this is a little bit like what was that movie, The Social Network, where he's kind of like pulling all this data. If you've got an informatics friend, they could probably pull all this data. But all we care about right now is looking, okay, Northeastern University in Boston. I know that one's a very good school. Then we've got UCLA and USC. Okay, so we see the Northeast. Now we've got the West. Then we've got UT at San Antonio, Ohio Northern. So that's one of those schools that does get to do APPEs there. And then, although she went to UT, she went to UMES. So that is 2 out of 4 that have the APPE, or kind of in that APPE group. We see another Ohio Northern, so now we're 3 out of 5 that were in that APPE group. UMKC is not in the APPE group, but he's in, so we're 3 out of 6. This one was Mercer going on to University of Georgia, so 3 out of 7. This one, University of Maryland Pharmacy, so 4 out of 8. So what we have is 4 out of the 8 students that received a residency or that matched as a PGY1 pharmacy resident are in that APPE group. So what I would bet is if you're in one of those schools, then and you did an APPE with Hopkins, especially if it's one of those longitudinal ones, then you're probably in a much better position than someone that's just applying from the other schools. And I would bet there's something like 2 piles. I have no idea. But I'm just saying that the data clearly show that we have 50% of the residents that are from one of those. It's a very narrow group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I missed Ohio State. 8, 9, 10. So you've only got 10 out of the 142 schools there are. So a very tiny percentage. But so you've got 10 out of 140. You're talking about 7 or 8% of the entire pharmacy schools can do an APPE there. But only, what is it, 4 of the schools from that represent 50% of the residents. So 7% versus 50%. And you can see that it's clear that there's a relationship there. And this is the real lesson that you're taking, is that, oh, okay. So applying to residency is first about going to those places where I've developed a relationship, and then going to those places that maybe I want to explore or build a relationship. Okay, let's go to Chicago and look at the PGY1 residents. I think these are the old ones. So Chicago, this is U Chicago Medicine. We see Kansas, which is in the Midwest. Roosevelt, which is a Chicago area. University of Illinois Chicago. University of Houston, very good school. University of Illinois Chicago. UNC. Butler, so again, Midwest. This is so kind of mid-Atlantic. Midwestern Chicago, Midwestern Downers Grove, Illinois, and then University of Illinois Chicago. So we see in terms of the PGY1s, although we've got a non-traditional, non-trads in here, 2 of them that are from Illinois, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 60% of the U Chicago Medicine PGY1s are from the Chicagoland area. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but if you go look at all the other ones you're going to see Xavier, Rutgers, that one's Chicago, Michigan. No, wait, did I get it wrong? No, that was Michigan, Minnesota, and you can see Butler, Chicago State, Midwestern Chicago, Iowa, and you can see Kentucky. So you can see that the PGY2s are extremely diverse, where 60% of the PGY1 residents at Chicago are from Chicago. And again, this isn't like, oh, we're only taking people from Chicago. It's that people from Chicago have decided to do APPEs at U Chicago Medicine. And this is the thing where you're kind of kicking yourself like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. So you're telling me that the best thing I should have done before pharmacy school was pick a pharmacy school with a high match rate, yes. And then what I should have done in October of my P3 year, when I don't know much of anything about what I'm going to do, is that I need to pick where I want to do a residency for my clinical APPEs. And I would say yes, that's what you want to do. And again, I think these were 2019, 2020 residents is what the thing says. So this is actually 2 years behind. But again, what I think that maybe a lot of people miss is how regional many of these are. And I'm going to show you what is an absolutely, what I would call a super regional, which is when you only take students from a very, very narrow area of the country, or maybe even just a single state. So we see, this is Princeton Baptist Medical Center. And you see that we have a student from Auburn, a student from Samford, and then if you're not familiar, those are both in Alabama, another student from Auburn. So there's 50 states in the union, 142 pharmacy schools. 75% of the residents are coming from a single state and 2 schools. Okay, and then there's somebody from the University of Mississippi, which is in the Deep South. It is in the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, if you kind of put the athletic conferences together. But that's kind of a mess as we go into fall. But you can see how hyper geographic this is. Now, I have no idea who applied here. I don't know if there were, a bunch of New Yorkers that said, "Oh man, I really want to go down to Alabama." I don't know. So I don't know the other side of this, but what I'm betting is that there was a good relationship between these students. They've done their APPEs there. They had a good fit. And the other thing that was kind of a neat thing that somebody did, I want to say a couple years ago, I was like, well, just looking at the places that you were looking at, it looks like you're kind of staying in the Deep South. And, with the hundreds of people that are applying, I wonder if it might be good for you to record your letter of intent. And the reason I said this is that they were applying to a school in the Deep South, and they were from the Deep South. And when you read something, you read it in your own voice. So if I kind of revert to my New England Mid-Atlantic accent, I might be reading this as, she's a second-year pharmacy resident specializing in internal medicine. She completed a PGY1 pharmacy residency at Princeton, where somebody from the South might go, is a second-year pharmacy resident specializing in internal medicine. She completed her PGY1 pharmacy residency at Princeton Baptist Medical Center in 2020. And I'm not trying to... I'm just saying those are kind of the extremes of the accents when you go to the Northeast and you go to the Deep South. I'm now in Iowa, very little accent here at all. So, but this is a very hyper-regional thing, and that means that probably these students have done APPEs, and they just have a really, really good relationship with Auburn and Samford and maybe Mississippi and maybe some of the other ones down there in Georgia and Florida and so forth. But what I want you to do is I want you to go back and I want you to go to ASHP Match Stats, find out what your school percentage is for registered and then active with the list. So that percentage is going to give you a rough estimate of how many got an interview. It's not exactly right, but it'll give you a rough estimate. And this is a little deceiving because 80% get an interview. So 80% is the midpoint. That's, so a B minus is the middle. And you don't want to say, oh, wow, 70% got an interview. That's actually a bit low when you start kind of doing the statistics on it. And then you want to look at, okay, from those active, how many matched, and you get that percentage. And then, how many matched that, wanted one in the first place. So you don't just want to do 51 over 74, you want to do 51 over 82. The reason for this is there are schools that have very high interview rates. That is, they get an interview, but very low rates when it comes to actually getting from the interview to being accepted by the residency. And the thing is that it can be one single person ahead of you, and that's not enough. I was kind of cheering for one of the British 800 meter runners, and she had lost by 0.12 seconds. So a little bit more than a tenth of a second. It's just unbelievable how close those were. And that's what it is a lot of these schools that have lower match rates, it might have just been that they're just right up there at the top, but just not quite over that hump. So first thing, make sure you figure out, all right, well, about what's my interview percentage? Okay, of those, how many got it? Because that's where you're going to kind of figure out, okay, well, what help do I really need? So if your school is one that is very low in getting interviews, then really the writing and the recommendations, and maybe to some extent the perception of the school, that's kind of into that pile. But then once you get to the interview, it's not your school, it's you. And that's when, the 100 residency interview questions, answers, and rationales that Brandon Dyson from TLDR Pharmacy and I put together can really help you out. Just so you really get an understanding of not only what they're asking, but why they're asking them. And again, man, just use the audiobooks. You're like, man, I've got no money now. It really isn't a lot, especially if you get the Audible membership. And they always give you the first one or two free. But if you're not getting it done, you're not getting reading done, use your commute, become a student of the process. Because it is, when you fail to get a residency, your chances go down by 50% the next year, regardless. So, you're graduating in 2022. If you go for 2023, if you go for the next year, then you would have something like a 30% chance versus a 60% chance or 50% chance for most of the graduates of this year. All right. So again, if you got questions, TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com. But really do consider working one-on-one with me, because I'm finding that that's really where the success lies. I'm going to tell you a quick story to finish out this episode. I know I've gone kind of almost a half hour, but when I was a kid, I came from a private school, and then I went to public school, and there was already the difficulty with that. And I assure you, I was not the cool kid. I was actually at the bottom of the social rankings for sure. And that was hard enough. But then I was actually not great at geometry. And so my mom and I, we go to the store, Barnes & Noble or whatever it was back then, and we get a geometry book. Never opened it. Never actually looked at it. Never actually used it. But I knew I needed help. So now kind of comes full circle. We had coronavirus. My daughters are, going into 5th grade. There's clear issue with the math and things like that. And so now I've got one daughter who I started right away, and then the other daughter started a couple weeks later, and they're going to something called Mathnasium, which is about 3 hours a week, 3 individual hours a week. They get one-on-one help with their math. Now, it is expensive. It's like $600 a month for both of them. And then I alternate the ones who are doing okay in math, but really want that extra help. But I knew that if I gave them a book, they wouldn't read it. I already tried to help them myself, and I knew that didn't work. But for whatever reason, going to talk to someone else, having someone else give them their workbook to do, they are absolutely engaged. So hopefully you take the opportunity to work with me so I can help you. Everyone that's kind of done it, you can see the reviews or whatever, but it just, what you think is good and what is at the level of the UNCs, Hopkins, Chicago, Princeton Baptist, all these, it is, you have to beat hundreds of people. And so what I think is the best mental exercise to do is, if you can even picture it, is to take 200 pieces of paper, put them on the ground, and then try to find yours. Okay? That's exactly what these residency sites are doing. And they're doing it with, for the ambulatory care one, they're doing it with 4 residents. And the acute care site, they're doing it with 8 residents. And there's this feeling that because you will send your LOI to the RPD, that the RPD is the first one to read it. But when you mathematically figure that out, you're like, wait a minute. In every application, there's X number of pages, and multiply X number of pages times the number of hours it takes to read. and you realize that it is impossible for the RPD to read them all. So most of the time, you're going to be having a resident look at your application first, and then it's going to kind of go on, and that absolutely has to stand out. So again, residency.teachable.com for one-on-one help, amazon.com pharmacy residency and career series. Start with a strong residency letter of intent. I guarantee that you'll get kind of a different perspective on what it really takes. But honestly, if you don't know your match rate from your school, and you don't know your interview rate, and you don't know where the residents are from, and then you'll dig deeper as we kind of talk about this later, but you'll want to know, do they accept somebody that has only retail experience in a hospital job? And the answer is absolutely not for many places. Okay, then I've got to get like a 4 or 8 hour a week hospital job somehow during my APPEs, because if I want to go to that residency site, I'm going to need that kind of experience. So I kind of went long on this one, but just wanted to come back strong and kind of help you guys out. Again, this is going to be, we're in August. If you start now, it will be much, much easier, I assure you, as things start to get really, really busy come November and December. And we don't know what's going on with Delta variant. We don't know if ASHP is going to be Orlando or something's crazy is going to happen. But I assure you that if you start writing now, writing your letter of intent, trying to understand the things that you need to do and where you want to go, everything becomes a lot easier. All right. That's it for me. Again, you got my contact information if you want to talk.